This is a very powerful, cunning disease.
The opioid epidemic.
And the heartbreaking impact on families.
He took his last breath in my arms, and that was it. He did not want to be addicted.
How did we get here?
We've been sold a bill of goods about, take a pill, it'll make you feel better. Addiction is a disease of secrecy and shame and loneliness.
And I just couldn't stand to look at myself in the mirror anymore.
And what's being done to help addicts survive and fight to live.
And once we open up our mouth and tell people where we're at and what's going on and that we need help, that's step one in the process.
Addiction comes with so much shame, and I'm here to kind of like smash that stigma and say, it doesn't look like anything. It looks like a doctor, it looks like a lawyer, it looks like a teacher, it looks like a postman, it looks like, like me.
Good evening, I'm Chris Horvatitz.
And I'm Abby Fridman. Thank you for joining us for this special Opioids, What Every Family Should Know.
According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, more than 106,000 people in the U.S. died from a drug-involved overdose in 2021. That includes illicit drugs and prescription opioids.
The Erie County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed 298 opioid overdose deaths in 2022, but they're still counting. They anticipate breaking 2016's record, which was 301 people who died.
So what is being done to curb this? For the next hour, we'll take a look at the opioid epidemic, which is affecting families not just across the country, but here in Western New York.
You'll hear from recovering addicts who every day are fighting to stay clean and stay alive.
We'll speak with doctors and specialists about what exactly makes opioids so addictive and the effect they have on the body, plus how to have difficult conversations with your kids about addiction.
Law enforcement will share their efforts to fight the crisis and the new dangerous methods being used to deal drugs that they're zeroing in on.
Two parents will tell their harrowing story about the loss of their son and their mission to raise awareness of the devastating effects of opioid medications.
And finally, the resources out there to get help for you or someone you know. We'll begin with Jim Wahlberg. You're probably familiar with his brothers, Mark and Donnie Wahlberg. Jim is their older brother, the head of the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation, which focuses on helping inner city kids and teaching the dangers of addiction. As a recovering addict, Jim uses his experience to help prevent kids from finding themselves in a similar situation. 56-year-old Jim Wahlberg is the fifth of 9 children. The son of a truck driver and a mother who cleaned bank offices overnight, his beginnings were humble. His struggles with substance abuse started early.
I picked up a drink at a very young age. Drugs followed right after. Was homeless by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, and continued on into my early adulthood, where I spent a little bit of time in state prison as well as a result of my substance use disorder.
Wahlberg attributes his time in prison as his rock bottom and the reason he's still here today.
I think it saved my life for sure. I think I was completely out of control.
He says his time behind bars gave him the opportunity to think clearly, get therapy, and go to self-help groups. And a special visitor, while he was behind bars, helped him look at life in a completely different way.
Mother Teresa actually came to the prison I was in and spoke to the inmates, and it had a profound impact on me. But I think up until the point she came, it was more about I was trying to create the illusion that I was trying to get my life together. I just really wanted to get out and get high.
While Wahlberg still considers himself to be in recovery, he is actively working to keep today's kids from following the same path as him. Wahlberg is now the executive director of the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation, which aims to improve the quality of life for kids. The foundation itself has been in existence for about 20 years. But as Wahlberg saw loved ones being directly impacted by the opioid epidemic, the organization began focusing on opioids the last 15 years.
It wasn't a matter of should we, it was why shouldn't we? We got to get in, we got to get involved in this. We got to try to help wherever we can.
The foundation hosts town halls in partnership with the DEA to educate young people on the dangers of substance abuse. As a recovering addict himself, Wahlberg knows firsthand what they're going through and how difficult the road to recovery can be.
You're dealing with the most addictive substances there are. You're essentially being asked to take away the one thing you see as the thing holding you together.
Wahlberg says the isolation from the COVID pandemic has played a major role in substance abuse among kids.
People are broken, people are sad, people are lost and alone, and they're looking to feel a different way than they do. Kids are, I think, are really medicating themselves. I don't think this is, an attempt to have fun. I think this is an attempt to try to fix some problems that they have internally.
Adding fentanyl to these drugs has created an entirely new challenge for those who are addicted.
This is the most dangerous time in my 57 years on this planet. This is the most dangerous time. The DEA talks about one pill can kill. That has never, ever been more true than it is right now. They say 8 out of 10 pills on the street are laced with fentanyl.
Wahlberg works each day to take his experience with substance abuse and recovery and help kids get themselves on the right track and stay there.
It does look like an impossible task. When you're fully addicted, it definitely looks like an impossible task. Recovery is possible, right? It is possible. It all starts with picking up that phone or talking to somebody that you may know that's in recovery and asking them for some help.
We'll have a virtual town hall coming up after our show at 9 p.m. on Facebook Live. There you can talk directly with some of the experts you'll see tonight.
Still ahead on opioids, what every family should know.
The efforts to stop drugs from getting into the hands of addicts and how social media is playing a role in this crisis.
Michael said, send me a text that says, Dad, you don't deserve a son like me. I love you.
And later, two parents share their emotional account of when they lost their son and what they're now doing to save others from that same pain.
As law enforcement works to fight the opioid epidemic, they're finding social media is giving a new space for dealers to reach addicts.
I spoke with a special agent in charge from the Drug Enforcement Administration about this growing problem and what's being done about it. Now, Agent, we've been talking about the opioid crisis for several years now. Has there been any change in how you've noticed these drugs are trafficked over the last several years?
Well, Chris, first and foremost, as a law enforcement agency that is on the front lines of the opioid epidemic and this crisis, it's the greatest threat to our public health and public safety right now. And, with nearly 108,000 people dying of drug poisonings, the DEA has taken this opportunity to meet this threat with an urgent and relentless pursuit of going after the people that are most responsible, and that is the Mexican cartels and these Chinese criminal groups who are flooding the United States with fentanyl, precursor chemicals, and fentanyl-laced fake prescription pills. And so what we're seeing is an evolution of drug trafficking in the 21st century with social media applications and web-based applications to move their poison throughout the United States.
How closely are you working with state and local partners on a law enforcement level to address this?
The DEA has a long history of working cooperatively with our state and local counterparts. In fact, much of our workforce across the country is based off of our relationships and our task force officer program. Here in the New York division, we have a large contingent of task force officers that are deputized to work alongside of us and with us to combat this threat. But also we work very cooperatively and collaboratively with our state and local counterparts in the communities in which we are trying to drive down drug-related violence and drug poisoning. So it's a big component. It's a big aspect of how we accomplish our mission. And we pride ourselves in working very, very closely with our state and local counterparts.
What is it you think that your agents at the DEA and local police need? What tools do you need? What help could you get from some of our elected officials as you battle this?
Well, what I would tell you is that, drug trafficking is an ever-changing, evolving business, and it is a business, and it's a criminal enterprise that yields $500 billion a year. And in a criminal business that's solely motivated by profit, they're constantly evolving and changing, and technology is a big aspect of what we're seeing today. The weaponizing of social media and the weaponizing of social media applications to drive their poison into our homes is what is most concerning. So we're constantly trying to keep up with these technological challenges and with these loopholes that exist. And so we're trying to hold these social media platforms accountable to scrape and be more responsible, scrape their platforms, be more responsible with what content they're allowing to move through their mediums. And so, we just are constantly trying to educate the public and make them aware of some of these threats, get into the schools and get into the community and share with the responsible adults and the educators and caregivers like what they should be looking for. And that's why DEA has the One Pill Can Kill initiative, and that's why people can go onto our website and look at our pill tracker and our DEA.gov site. They can access some of these tools and some of this information that's helpful to them.
Let me ask for a little more information on the social media aspect. How are you seeing that being used? How are you seeing that being weaponized? And what can people look out for as they're on social media?
So as I mentioned, DEA has several different initiatives that are ongoing, but we have a lot of information on our website, DEA.gov. And you can go to DEA.OnePillCanKill or onepill.gov to see some of these informational tools that are available. For example, we have a cheat sheet or a diagram of what some of the emojis that these drug traffickers are using to communicate with our most vulnerable. And they're using this secretive coded language to not just to speak to customers, but to try to entice new customers. And so the media, the The social media platforms are just another tool that the drug trafficking organizations have utilized and harnessed to really drive their message, their poison out into the streets. And, the drug trafficking of 10, 15 years ago happening in dark alleys on city streets, it does still exist, but it's been minimized, and a lot of it is because of social media and because it's so easy to reach people. And that's what the cartels are really interested in, right? They're interested in increasing their customer base, increasing their profit margins, and so the more that they can reach out on social media platforms, the more that they can flood the city and the country with this poison, the more they're going to make on the profit end, right? So it's about making more money. It's about increasing their customer base. It's about driving addiction. And that's their sole motivation.
We just heard Special Agent in Charge Frank Tarantino say social media is playing a part in the trafficking of these drugs. That's something that Buffalo Congressman Brian Higgins agrees with. He's a supporter of the Safe Tech Act, which would address the controversial Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. It's a bill Higgins says should have bipartisan support.
The bill forces social media platforms to address these problems or to be held accountable under federal law. In these bills, speech is protected, but information to obtain illegal drugs online is not.
Higgins says the government has an obligation to protect people, so Congress needs to act as quickly as possible.
Coming up on Opioids, what every family should know.
Turning tragedy into hope, how local parents took their family's heartbreak and made it their mission to help recovering addicts and their families fight one day at a time. It's a parent's worst nightmare, the death of a child.
Sadly, it's a reality for many parents as a result of opioids. After Avi and Julia Israel lost their son Michael, they made it their mission to help those in recovery and keep other families from experiencing a loss like they did. Avi and Julia Israel, thanks so much for being here. You guys are the founders of the Save the Michaels of the World nonprofit. For those who don't know, can you just start off by telling us a little bit about the work that you guys do?
Sure, go ahead. Okay, so what we do is try to make it easier for you to find treatment and access treatment and provide you the support that you need after treatment. What I mean by that is bureaucracy gets in the way. And it's a very complicated system that we have, healthcare system in this country, that it's very hard to navigate when it comes to mental health and addiction. If you look at your insurance card, you'll see that on the back of the card, when it comes to mental health and SUD, substance use disorder, you call a separate number.
Okay.
All right. Those services are not readily available. There's obstacles in the way. Government gets in the way. Insurance gets in the way. We basically remove all those obstacles and allow you to get into treatment.
You are the founders of this organization, and it's something that's very close to your heart. Your son, Michael, is the inspiration behind it. Would you like to speak a little bit about him?
Oh, yeah. So, Michael, you know what? Like any other parent would say, you know, their children are their joy. Michael was a joy. He was our only son. We have 3 beautiful daughters.
Between grade school and high school, Michael was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and we got him to treatment. We fought with insurance companies to make sure he gets the best of the medical treatment, and he did. And he did very good for a while. He was just far away from remission. But then Michael got to 18, and we had to transfer from pediatric care to adult care, and that's when the trouble started. Michael went to school at the University of Buffalo. You know, he had a disease, and he wanted to behave just like everybody else. So, you know, he wanted to have a beer or have some chicken wings. That did not agree with him. So the pain started, and with the pain came painkillers. And for an 18-year-old, it's very easy to get hooked. Michael got addicted. He went through a surgery. There were more painkillers that came. We were not really aware of Michael's addiction until December of 2010. We always attributed his isolation and the strange behavior to his Crohn's disease. But there was classic behaviors of addiction. And Michael talked to us, it was December of 2010, and said, Dad, I'm addicted. And the question was, addicted to what, Michael? And it was my painkillers. And then we found how difficult it is to get help.
Yeah, I was going to say, to that point, when Michael said I was addicted, there was no discussion like there is today about addiction, and it was very much in the shadows. No one talked about it. So we had no idea the depth of our son's addiction and how much he was really suffering until we were in it. And we were left to our own devices to try to find him help, because there wasn't anything for us to help navigate the system.
Michael tried his hardest to do it, and that was in April of 2011, and on May 17, to be exact, of 2011, Michael said, send me a text that says, Dad, you don't deserve a son like me. I love you. And we knew what he was trying to do. So I called Julie. She was trying to get hold of him. And she got hold of him. And he was sitting in the garage with a car running. He was attempting suicide. So we called 911. By the time I got home, Michael was out of the car. The police officer said that he has to go to Erie County Medical Center. You have no choice in the matter. And he did. We went to ECMC. He was taken to the CPAP unit. And that is one of the most horrible places to bring a young kid into. After 12 hours in there, we were told to take Michael home. There was no follow-up, there was nothing. Michael tried to go without doing any pills or anything. I think once in a while he would buy them on the street, but on June 4th, we asked Michael to call his counselor. And he said he will.
He did.
And he called her asking for help to get into treatment. It took her 5 minutes and 47 seconds to call back. And she said there are no beds. So he handed me the phone. He went into the back bedroom. He pulled a shotgun that he used for target shooting. He put it under his chin and pulled the trigger. And I kicked the door. I grabbed Michael. He was trying to breathe. But he took his last breath in my arms. And that was it.
I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine the pain that you're feeling. What's your message to parents?
You know, any type of drug use is serious as can be. I often hear parents say, you know, well, they're smoking a little bit of marijuana, you know, no harm, no foul. And that to me is just, you know, red flags all over the place. You know, that to me speaks to maybe something deeper going on with your child that you really should be having a conversation with them about as best you can to draw them out with no judgment. If children are, you know, experimenting or smoking marijuana, they're doing it because, you know, they may be hurting from, you know, social
Bullying.
yeah, I was gonna say social pressures, peer pressures, depression, anything like that. So listen, you know, listen to your children without judgment.
Thank you both so much for coming on, Julie and Avi. Thank you for sharing Michael's story with us. We certainly appreciate it.
Still ahead on opioids, what every family should know.
We'll take a closer look at what exactly makes opioids so addictive and hear from a doctor about the effects they have on the body.
Extensive use of opioids can have a serious effect on the body. More than anything, users develop a tolerance over time, which causes the addiction to grow. More often than not, doctors say opioid use disorder, or OUD, starts with an injury, a broken bone, dental work, surgery.
And we had medical students ask these people, how did your addiction start? And about 40% said that it started with their own prescription.
A common misconception for users, though, is that opioids stop the pain. Dr. Richard Blondell, a former professor at the Jacobs School of Medicine and an expert on addiction, substance abuse, and opioids, says these drugs give people a false sense of reality and reward.
They also affect your perception of pain within the brain itself.
The power of opioids shouldn't be underestimated. Doctors say once these drugs become a habit, it can be very hard to convince the body and the brain that they aren't needed to function.
In your brain, you have opioid receptors. And the more opioids used, the more receptors that pop out of your brain. And your opioid receptors, by that point, are not happy if they are not filled with opioids.
Dr. Blondell says opioid use disorder can lead to some serious long-term health problems.
So if you're injecting drugs, you can inject germs and bacteria into your bloodstream and cause an infection. If you're inhaling drugs through the nose, that could damage the lining of the nose, for instance.
Erie County Health Commissioner Dr. Gail Burstein says moves are being made to help fight the opioid crisis. With the state prescription monitoring program known as iStop, doctors are able to track overprescribing.
It becomes more challenging for a patient to go doctor shopping, and healthcare providers will know if a patient already has an active prescription for narcotic pain medication.
She tells me they're seeing a decrease in overprescribing since iStop was formed. That being said, addicts may try to get their drugs from dealers, which brings forward the threat of fentanyl. Dr. Burstein says because of this, they saw a record number of overdose deaths in 2022.
And our medical examiner is very, very busy. So just a word out, user beware. But if we don't get it for a pharmacy, you never really know what the contents are. And they can look exactly like the pills you could buy at a pharmacy.
Dr. Burstein says if you are struggling with addiction, having fentanyl test strips and Naxalon, also known as Narcan, will save lives. Now, if you have old prescriptions sitting in your medicine cabinet, doctors say get rid of them. There are places you can safely dispose of those all around our area. We'll provide that interactive map on our website.
While many lose their battle to addiction, many more are fighting every day to stay alive. We sat down with two Western New Yorkers in recovery, one from opioid use and one from alcohol.
Stephen Fitch and Tonya Bangle both work with Save the Michaels now. We learned about their journey with substance abuse.
I guess I started in high school, started with, just marijuana, drinking, that kind of thing. I had a couple friends that would get pills from their parents, stealing them out of the cabinets, that kind of thing. And started with hydrocodones and then oxys, and then eventually they changed the formula of the OxyContin to make it so you couldn't crush them up anymore. So once that happened, I switched to heroin.
You were a teenager when this?
Yeah, it happened pretty quickly, probably about a year. It went from, pills to IV heroin.
My story is alcoholism. I started drinking alcohol at a young age. However, my alcoholism did not go into full throttle until my 30s when I got divorced. And I was a party girl. And 3 years into that, I was getting a DWI, I lost my license, I lost a job. I was raising children on my own with the help of their dad, of course. And I found myself in rehab in my mid to late 30s, which I did very well. And then I became very active in the AA program.
At what point for each of you do you think was rock bottom where you thought, okay, I need to get help right now? Or do you think it was always kind of lingering in the back of your mind?
For me, I think I knew for a while that it was something I needed to, I had to stop somehow. But I think at one point I was on probation after a DUI I had, and I was, testing dirty. They drug test you for probation, and if I kept doing that, I was going to end up in jail. It was just a matter of time. So, I called Save the Michaels. I called them. I said, hey, I need to get into treatment, and they got me in. Within 2 days, they got me in, and that was about 4.5 years ago. So that was. That was, I think, what turned it around.
Tanya, can I ask you if you see any similarities in the opioid crisis versus what you experience with alcoholism? Are there mirrors there?
Absolutely.
What do you see?
Absolutely. Addiction is addiction. And when we're in it, no matter if it's a drug or alcohol is a drug, it hits that parts of your brain that just keeps wanting it, and it's hard to get out of it. What comes along with that is the guilt, the shame, the remorse, and that keeps building up and building up. So that's where the mirror is.
Stephen, you said it's been about 4.5 years. How long has it been for you in recovery?
I have been in recovery now for 2 years, since my last reoccurrence.
What has that journey been like over 2 years?
Amazing.
Really?
Amazing.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I really full-fledged put myself into the program. Save the Michaels actually has saved me, which is why I'm working there now. I had left a domestically violent relationship. I knew that it was time for me to make a change. He became a drug addict, and I was drinking, and it was just not healthy. And I knew and I could see who I wanted to be as a person. And I knew it wasn't too late. So I went to the hospital, and they said, you can't do it alone. And I went to a medically assisted detox unit for 3 days. And after that, just hit the ground running with AA. And AA is where my recovery began years ago, and then I re-immersed myself into it just differently. I decided to do the 12 steps and help others, and I still continue to do that today.
You guys both work with Save the Michaels. You have a good perspective on this opioid crisis. What is it that you need? What is it that people in recovery need to get where they need to be, whether it be from some of our lawmakers, just people out there? What do you need?
I think easier access to medications like Suboxone and methadone, would be a really, really big step. I mean, right now, getting on methadone is, sometimes you call up, at least in my case, that's what I was on. It took me calling countless times, took probably a couple months before I got into the clinic. And that whole time, while I was waiting to get in, I'm still using. They'll let you in eventually, and you got to go there every single day, early in the morning. You got a job, it doesn't matter. You got to show up, or you're not getting your medication. And I feel like it could be a lot easier to get into these clinics and get this medication that, and at least in my case, it probably saved my life getting on that.
Tanya, how about you?
Oh, I feel the stigma. Stigma with the general public, and the stigma with lawmakers to make things more easily accessible. I think there needs to be more places like, or a growth of Save the Michaels. Peer recovery is so important because we can meet families. I meet with families, and he meets with peers where they're at, and let them know that they're not alone and that there is hope. But definitely stigma. Stigma's huge. None of us, I didn't want to become an alcoholic. It's not something that I asked for. So it's very, it's just the stigma.
You feel judged by?
I used to, which was another excuse for me to keep drinking. Not anymore, no. I feel empowered that I'm able to overcome it. And every day I get my daily medicine of recovery, and I can give to others and give them hope.
We thank Stephen and Tanya for sharing their stories. Still ahead on opioids, what every family should know.
Talking to your children about substance abuse. We'll hear from a school social worker about how to have those tough conversations with your kids to keep them safe and away from harm. Welcome back. Throughout your child's life, you may have many important conversations with them. One of the toughest ones will be about substance abuse.
We turn to school social worker Tina Lemondola with Hamburg Schools for advice on how to have that conversation with your kids. Tina, these can be difficult conversations for parents to have. What are some ways that they can be easier? What can you do to make them easier?
I think the first thing you have to do is create a time and a space to have those conversations, so where you're not having constant interruptions, a space that is free of distractions. So you want to, I have 2 teenage boys, so sometimes we're having these conversations when we're driving to practice or we're walking the dog. So a place that just feels comfortable to both you and your child. In addition to creating that set time away, you want to talk to kids about like, what are their views on substance use? What do they know? What are their questions? In a way that you just listen. So asking those difficult questions, but not lecturing, just sitting back and listening to them is going to be really helpful. But you also don't want to use scare tactics, but you want to talk about like the health implications of drug use as well. So it can impact someone's ability to drive, how they perform in school, how they do on the sports team, how they are functioning within their family and friends. So when you're having those conversations in a safe way, but not a lecture way, and not using scare tactics, I feel is the best approach.
Do you find typically kids know more than their parents realize they know about what's going on?
I think so, but I think, again, I go back to you have to really just sit and listen and hear what they're experiencing. So when you ask your child, what kinds of things are you hearing about in school? Or what kinds of things are you seeing in school? Or are kids vaping? Are they going into the bathroom? Do you smell smoke? When you're out with your friends, are people drinking? You also have to be aware of your friends, your child's friends and their families. So you want to have some keeping your finger on the pulse of where they're at and who their families are. Is there going to be an adult home? But also be open to just listening without them getting in trouble. So I think that that's another point to make, is you don't want them to feel like they can't open up and talk to you about these difficult conversations with, oh gosh, am I going to get in trouble, or I'm going to be grounded, or mom won't let me take the car on Friday night. So you want to just create some comfort there too when you're having those conversations.
At what age is it appropriate to start having the conversations? Obviously, you don't want them to be too young, but where's that sweet spot?
So research shows middle school, and between ages 12 and 14 is when kids are starting to be exposed to substances. So I think developmentally appropriate for middle school. The conversation is going to look different when they're in high school. So I think you got to start talking about good decisions, setting some rules and consequences, and also sharing with your child what are your expectations, what are your family rules, but also following through on that.
So what are some red flags to look out for? You watch what your son or daughter is doing, and you see something, you say, that's not right, that should be a red flag for me.
Sudden dramatic changes in mood and affect. So maybe they're a straight A student and suddenly they're not passing. Changes in their affect, maybe changes in their sleeping patterns or eating patterns. Other red flags would be finding drug paraphernalia in their room, maybe pill containers that they aren't taking medication for any kind of pre-existing condition. Catching them with irresponsible, reckless, impulsive behavior, maybe lying, and where they said they're going to be, they're not there. So those are the biggest red flags.
We've been hearing so much about how social media has played a role in this as well. How do you see that play a role in this, and how it can be handled?
I think in terms of Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, or even in what kids are listening to or watching for television programs, a lot of substance use is glamorized or glorified, or it's just more the norm. So they're used to that language, or maybe what behaviors or kids are engaging in, so it becomes more normalized. So I think it's important that when you do talk to your child, that you're finding out about, like, when they're listening to on the radio or what television programs they're watching, because that does make it more normal for them, which is scary.
So bottom line, what is everything that a parent can do, should do right now today to help their child out if they're maybe either struggling or maybe they're afraid that they may be going down that path toward that?
Create that safe space and have a conversation. Don't do it in the middle of an argument. Don't do it if the person's under the influence. You want to start that dialogue when they're in middle, and it's never too late to start that conversation, but don't have just one conversation and let that be the end of it. I think it's really important that you continue these conversations, but in addition, we know that mental health issues, this is a crisis, and kids are experiencing depression and anxiety more than ever. So one of the things that some children do go towards is self-medicating. And so when you have both co-occurring disorders going on, it can create really high-risk scenarios for your child. So my main point would be is have those conversations, start that dialogue, and create a space where your child's not going to feel like they're in trouble if they come and tell you something. That might be really hard for you to hear as a parent, but also as a parent myself of 2 teenage boys, I think it's going to be important that you as a parent can seek out resources too. So find somebody in your life that you trust, that you feel comfortable with in a non-judgmental way, whether it's a friend or a family member, but also seek out some professional help. There's some really great programs out there, Saving Michaels of the world, Kids Escaping Drugs, where this is not their first go around with what to ask, who to ask, where to go to. If there are red flags and your child is not talking to you openly about them, and your gut tells you that something is in serious harm's way, and I would really encourage a parent to go and reach out for help and not have any shame, because I think so much of what parents go through is feeling embarrassed and feeling guilty and feeling isolated and alone, that they feel like nobody else is going through what I'm going through and I'm going to be judged. And what I would recommend to a parent is call somebody, call the Save the Michaels of the world. All the people that work there have been through these experiences and know just what a family member is going through and how scary that process can be to go. And so don't go in it alone and by yourself. Reach out for some help.
All right, Tina, some good advice here. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Still to come on opioids, what every family should know.
What's being done to help those fighting with addiction? We'll take a look at the resources available to those in each stage of recovery and what's being done to stop kids before they start.
One of the biggest obstacles to stopping substance abuse is getting young people help before it becomes a problem.
A collaboration between Erie County schools and the county itself is working to make the process of getting help more efficient. The SMART initiative began last fall. It brings together school-based mental health leaders, those in clinical and agency settings, and those who provide inpatient care for young people. According to Michael Cornell, the president of the Erie Niagara School Superintendents Association, fostering those connections helps each group more effectively direct young people to the care they need before it develops into substance abuse.
Because what happens if families can't navigate that network, some of them just stop. And when they stop at any of those roadblocks, that's when the self-medication happens. Kids start using gateway drugs and they become more serious drug users. And we've seen that cycle replicate itself over and over and over again.
Cornell says it will take years to see if the impact of the SMART initiative, but hopes that we'll eventually see a decrease in substance abuse among young people. Now, we spent the last hour telling you the effect opioids have on the body, the impact it has on families and those struggling with addiction, and how to talk to your children about it.
Now, we want to tell you some of the ways you can get help. To start, the Salvation Army has free residential facilities for anyone trying to get assistance. Erie County also has a 24-hour addiction hotline. There you can get immediate help, education, information, and referrals. That number is 716-831-7007. For Narcan or fentanyl test strips, you can text 716-225-5473, or you can call 716-858-7695. Now, if your child needs help, there's a crisis services kids helpline through Kids Escaping Drugs. That number is 716-834-1144, or you can text opioid to 898-211. You can also call 211.
For those outside of Erie County, there is the New York State Hope Line for free and confidential help 24/7. That number is 877-846-7369. You can also text 467-369.
And the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration has a national helpline. It's free, confidential, 24/7 treatment, referral, and information service. There they provide service in English and for Spanish for individuals and families facing substance use disorders. That number is 1-800-662-HELP. And as we heard earlier in the broadcast, Save the Michaels of the World also focuses on working with people in recovery.
The local organization was started by Avi and Julie Israel after the death of their son. Save the Michaels is staffed by recovering addicts who offer support to people in all stages, from active addiction to long-term recovery. They also work with families, teaching them how to give their loved ones the direction they need while also creating boundaries.
Teaching them about how to communicate better with their loved one, to meet them where they're at, to meet them with understanding and compassion. I think what I see a lot of is conflict and contention about why somebody keeps doing what they're doing, and not really understanding that this is a disease and that oftentimes the person who's struggling doesn't have a choice.
In addition to coaching, Save the Michaels prepares referrals to treatment centers in New York and Pennsylvania. They also provide transportation to and from treatment centers, appointments, group sessions, and grocery shopping. We'll have links to all of these resources on our website, WIVB.com, under the Community tab.
We'd like to thank all of our experts and those in recovery who joined us tonight to share their knowledge and their personal stories. Be sure to tune in right now on Facebook Live. You can join us for the virtual town hall. You can speak directly with experts about opioids and substance abuse. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.